Good to go.
Wow. The Major Second Transportation Mobility Board meeting started here. We have a nice turnout. It's great. Can I get a show of hands who would like to make public comment tonight? All right, let's go ahead and we will start at this end. Sir, if you mind stepping up, tell us your name, where you're from, and you'll have your 3 minutes. Maybe right down there.
That's the execution.
That's we'll have clear line of sight that way.
Have a lever and people disappear.
Exactly right. We get the same in as our city council representative.
Have a lever for me too. I talk too much.
So, good evening. Steve Lowry from District 3. I just want to update the TMB on the vote that was taken Tuesday by council. And they decided to forward the contract for the Mineral Mobility East Improvement Project, which includes work on Mineral Avenue, Jackass Hill, which of course is needed. It also includes the paving of the Mineral Avenue Trail, which is also known as the Railroad Spur Trail, for a cost of about $1 million. The vote was 5-1. Pat Driscoll is the one who voted not to advance the contract. The other 5, after listening to the city's presentation, we feel was not. We feel the city's presentation stretched the truth or ignored the truth in quite a few places. But the city council decided to accept what the staff had to say. They voted 5-1 to advance the contract. Part of this contract has happened because of activities that occurred here, because in the application to Arapahoe County Open Space in 2023, and the letters of support came from your former chair. He submitted a letter as former chair of this committee, and also from your vice chair, submitted as vice chair, saying the TMB supported the project. But in fact, you had 2 people, one of which is here tonight, who expressed considerable concerns about putting a concrete trail down through Jackass Gulch and trying to turn a recreation trail into a commuter trail. So our position now, the people that like soft trails, is to ask the city to install a 4-foot crusher fine trail south of the concrete trail in this 100-foot right of way, and so that runners and walkers can use it. Because what the city has done by voting for this concrete trail is it deprives hundreds of citizens that want to use a crusher fine trail for walking, running, equestrian needs. So the city likes to talk about accessibility, and as a result of this project, the applications that were submitted,
That's time right there, yeah.
you've denied people accessibility. And I think that the board should recommend the city put in that crusher funds trail. Funds are available.
Thank you.
Hi, TMB. I'm Kim Hepburn. I live a block and a half from here. So on the agenda tonight is you're discussing participating in the Laddie Street design. And I don't feel I'm that pushy that often, but I am right now. So I don't think that's the right thing for this board to spend its time on. The details of a project should really be handled by staff. And you folks are an extension of city council. You, boards and commissions exist to support council in policy making. And I'm just next door, we finished a meeting about redesign of this whole area, Geneva Village, and then tearing down city center and replacing it, and moving city center located with Arapahoe County, et cetera, et cetera. No feasibility was done. I think Prince Street is a non-starter. Our housing requirements have reduced parking requirements, and even in this area, there may be none. And so parking will occur on the street. And the joke is they're talking about the North Gateway, and I can imagine a North Gateway choked with parking on both sides of Prince Street, not very welcoming, not very beautiful, pretty bad. And so feasibility studies were not done. So there's that project, but there's also the Littleton Boulevard, quote, quote, sub-area. Now, I think that transportation is critical to the Littleton Boulevard plan. It's not just that I think that it is, it's critical. Littleton Boulevard with the first Littleton Brewing Company thing, it's a failure in terms of city infrastructure. We do not have enough parking there. We didn't require it. Our city manager said it complies with code. But you got pedestrians parking and walking across a dangerous road and in front of residences and inconveniencing those residents. How many more of those can we afford? I'd say 0. So you need to participate and I think be integrated into the work plan for the Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan. And I want to see staff bring that integration of this board into that Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan. And my plan is Littleton Boulevard remains historically car-centric, and then powers, as TMB mentioned before, pedestrian and bike-oriented. And then imagine the side streets being activated for retail, community gatherings, all that space. It's like downtown, but expanded for a mile. It is an awesome opportunity. That's a much better long-term plan for the city than redeveloping the square. And you guys are integral. Solving the transportation policy for that plan is fundamental to making it the best plan for it.
My name is Pat McCall. I'm in District 3. Actually, Southbridge Townhome's been there for 31 years. To some of Pam's concerns, I'm very concerned about Littleton and the direction it's taking. I would ask you guys, I come from oil and gas mapping, and Littleton has probably the best mapping package available, which is an ESRI product. Environmental Systems Research out of California. You probably know it as ArcMap, ArcInfo, things like that. Gives you a lot of calculation abilities with the GIS. The joke in the business is points, lines, and polygons. You can describe about anything, put your attributes off of them. I would ask, this is my first time to your meeting, that what do you guys know about the data? I would say for you guys to be able to do your job, you should know every parking space in Littleton, whether it's private or public. You should know the traffic density on every major road. And the reason I say that is I live about 3 blocks off of Mineral. They're building a Costco. Bad choice for our neighborhood. I am a member, I'm an executive member of Costco. We go to Park Meadows, we go to the one on Santa Fe. They're designed to be in a location just off the highway, not Mineral. We're gonna have 1 million vehicles when that thing's built in a year. And I question the pedestrians. Good luck getting across Mineral. We don't even venture across it to go to the King Soopers. Small town is gone in District 3 once that's built. So I'm going to be giving the city council hell, or you've ruined my small town feel. And it's coming to the other districts. So, you know, if you're worried about transportation and mobility, you need to know what the densities are of your people, how they're getting from here to there, if you're going to make good decisions for what should be be allowed. I think the Costco was a poor decision. Pam mentioned briefly the Littleton Brewery. I can't imagine we build a brewery with 7 parking spaces. It serves food. How could that ever be done? I mean, this sounds like Littleton is in zoning 101. I don't understand how it could ever be done. I'm a big believer we should throw out the code and go back to the old one. Now, I understand the liability. We've done these deals with developers. Our code is designed for developers. This is a developer's paradise. They're going to develop every square inch unless you push back. So I'd love to find out if you've got parking spaces, traffic densities. I live in Southbridge, which is one of 9 associations there.
Time, yeah. Time's up, thank you.
Okay. So.
Hi there, my name is Robin Bernstein. I live at Littleton Crossing, and this is kind of apropos because this is about me walking. It's my own experience. So I want a world that works for all, not just the car and the driver. Another killing zone is the corner of Windermere and Littleton Boulevard in the Woodlawn Shopping Center. For example, I was there the other day. I was crossing from the sidewalk street by the fitness center, that way. And then when a big white truck speeds in front of me, he tries to go into the tight parking space right here. So I wait. And he backs up. And so I say, slow down. And then he violently shoves his truck into the space across from me. So I wait. So I think he's gonna back up and jerk around, you know? So finally I cross. When he has parked and it is safe to cross, as I pass him, I say again, slow down. He then yells, what am I supposed to do, stop? I then say to him, you're unconscious, don't kill anybody today. So then his rage, he has a road rage meltdown, this guy. He curses, yells, spits, I see him giving me the finger, and then venom flows out of him. So then I think to myself, it's so obvious he's deranged, this guy, emotionally and mentally. So I thought to myself, I wonder if meditation or mindfulness could possibly help the guy. You know, that would help us 101. So anyway, Wes Marshall, killed by a traffic engineer, says that traffic deaths are a moral issue. It is a public health failure when pedestrians are killed by the car. For Zero Vision in Boulder, Colorado, deaths decrease, except for yesterday, when that guy was killed. There were 0 pedestrian deaths in 11 years. Bicycling and walking without getting killed are possible. So are safe streets, and the solution is 1, reduce speeds, 2, separate pedestrians and bikes from the car, 3, protective left turns, give pedestrians time to cross, and prioritize sidewalks. Thanks to the decay of public parks, places, streets, squares, and places, the time spent in public realm is now in the car. The car is now a private space as well as a sociopathic device. Road relations compete for asphalt. One wrong move and you're screwed. Driver honks, take your space, another antisocial act. Rarely do you see 2 pedestrians gesture rudely at each other when they walk. So 80% of all car trips are short drives that can be walked. The useful walk has disappeared. Lack of vigor, obesity, and no endurance can be cured by walking without a car. Driving in isolation has increased the decline in the art of getting along. So I would also say that we need the shopping cart. You know, not just for people like me, but it would help all of Littleton. Thanks.
Sure. Last but certainly not least.
I'm Connie Cantrell. I've lived here in Littleton for 72 years. I think I'm in District 1. I live between Datura and Gallup, and my windows have started being open. I can't believe the traffic that comes down Gallup, and just motorcycles, cars. And then I can't even imagine what's happening at the intersection as they're going down and when they hit Littleton Boulevard. Yeah, crazy stuff. The shopping cart bus is still really, really needed. I was in Golden the other day. They got one. So that would be very, very helpful. One of the things that you discussed here is enforcement, how that is your number one. I mean, you can put a speed limit there, but if it's not enforced, I've seen 2 cops this week sitting out there with their radar. So it is happening, and I think it's gonna make a difference. Thank you.
How far south are you? Between Deterra and Gallup, but how far south?
I'm right by Littleton Boulevard.
Oh, okay, so you're in my district.
Your district too, just so you know.
Yeah, District 2.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. So for the agenda today, we have several presentations we're gonna go through. Hopefully they'll be on the shorter side versus the longer side. We'll see how it goes. But before we do that, we actually do have, I wanted to follow up on some administrative items, just so we can clear the plate and give you the time and space you need. First of all, quick recap of our meeting last week. I thought it went really well. Where we ended up was we are all, as our subcommittees for our topics, we need to be bringing back the one pager. We talked about two high level headings, background, current conditions, and then recommendations. The one thing I don't think we clearly stated during that meeting, and I looked to Shane a little bit for feedback as to timing, is when all those need to be in, right? So this last one, great, we got to throw our stuff out there, we got stuff beaten up a little bit, we came up with this idea of where to go forward, but for these one pagers, is your vision that we would bring those to maybe the June meeting and make some votes then, and then bring some more to the July meeting and finish them up then, or do them all in one meeting? Do you have a thought on that one way or the other?
Yeah, well, so I was thinking as a good way to recap at the next meeting, since that was kind of, we had a short amount of time from our, previous meeting to schedule that one, and Josh and Kelly weren't able to make it. Is that bringing the one pager to our next extra meeting in June, which I believe everyone can make, and then kind of discussing that and recapping, and that gives Josh and Kelly a chance to kind of add anything in after watching the recording that they may feel is appropriate. That would be my suggestion, and then if we can kind of do that a month after the extra meetings, then we're not trying to cram it all in at the beginning or at the end and remember what was said and all that other stuff, so.
Let me make sure I heard you. So the ones from this, we would talk about it, we would have in 2 weeks before the meeting, talk about a June meeting. And then at the July meeting, we would talk about our June topics and our July topics.
Yeah, I guess we'd have to,
July topic.
Yeah, so yes. Yeah.
And then visually present them to you, and we're done with that part, we can move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, concerns, problems with that?
No, that sounds good.
All right.
Everybody any notes from last, so I wasn't here.
So I know Dave and I are gonna target, we're gonna meet when he gets back. And we're gonna target having that in before the next special meeting, which I believe is June 15th, is that right? June. That's correct. Whatever the next meeting is, that special meeting, we were gonna have a few days before that, so that everybody can review it.
Yeah, and if you want to get something in the packet and just, if you could send it to staff the Friday before that meeting, and then that's when we try to send out the packet. It didn't happen this last week, apologies, but that's what we try to do, and so we can send it out and then people have a chance to review and prepare for the discussion the next week.
Okay. Next topic, I'd like to get a date. We don't need to do it tonight, but I'm hoping maybe we could do it with the doodle, Shane. A date on the calendar for our annual field trip. I don't want field trip, but so what we do is every year in the fall, we meet on a Saturday. We all hop in the omnibus. All right. And we go and tour somewhere between 3 and 5 things that are going on in the city transportation related. So we see them, staff comes with us, helps us understand more exactly why we're doing this, what the vision is, ask questions, public is invited to join us as well. And it's, I think it's really helpful to get out there and actually see a lot of the stuff. So I Personally, I think we should target late September, early October. So Shane, if you wouldn't mind setting up a doodle with, I'll let the 4 weekends, the last 2 in September, the first 2 in October. We can all go in, say what we're available for, and then obviously based upon staff availability as well. And then pick one and have it set. In years past, we have sometimes waited until August to do that, and then everybody's got schedules and it makes it really hard to set it up. All right, so that is that. Next is the meet, greet and eat days. There are 3 that were put on the calendar. I'm gonna look for a little help from you because I can't remember who we assigned to which one. I know I'm going to the June one.
Yes, so in the calendar invites, if that's the one we were hoping for you to attend, you're in the required section. And if it's just one, just so it's on your calendar, if you're optional, then don't feel obligated to attend. But yes, June 18th and Trailmark.
That's me and I think Dave, is that right, or is that you? So while he's looking that up, what we're trying to do is we want to have minimum of 2 members at each of these events. We'll talk a little bit about what we're gonna do there, but more certainly better than less. So if you are assigned to the July one or the August one, but you'd like to come to the June one too, have at it.
Yeah, so I have Jeff and Dave for June. And in July, it is July 9th. Oh, no, it's not. That's our extra meeting. Apologies. On calendar. July 16th at Southbridge. And it's Derek and Michael for that one. And then August 20th at Charlie Emily Park, and that's Kelly, Josh, and Matt. Again, anyone can show up to any of them, and we're working with communications to get you guys your own space. But I don't know if you have any questions.
And speaking of communications, we talked about this at the last meeting, but I know Josh wasn't there. Derek and I met with the city communications team about putting together some communications plans for us for this event, as well as some other events that we're in going forward. I realized this afternoon as I was going through and getting ready for this, I realized I did not, I didn't send the email I was supposed to send to them with some stuff, so I just set it off now. But hopefully we will have some slides, some collateral, some material, some things that we can use during those eats, as well as, we're gonna get a little bit of time from them on messaging. What is our messaging? What do we say? And making sure we're all prepared for that. So it's not just throwing people out into the crowd and saying, have at it. I think we're gonna talk about that a little later in the conversation, but we're in the meeting. So I'll hold off. All right, we'll get right to the communications plan in a minute. Anything else administratively? I'm sorry. So historically, we've always waited till the very end of the meeting for the staff to provide their comments. We talked about we'd like to try moving that towards the beginning of the meeting, get it out of the way. Oftentimes there's some sort of feedback from staff on our last meeting. I feel like it's better to get that out at the beginning versus waiting, covered a bunch more topics and then getting that. So staff, anything that you coming back from previous meetings with questions we had or any comments you guys have?
I think I just have a reminder on the boards and commissions dinner, which is June 11th. So I think you've all hopefully received invites to that. If not, let me know. All your names are on the list, so they may have come to your city email, but if you haven't seen it, let me know and we can reach out to the appropriate folks. That's it for me.
Is everyone else? I'm not gonna be there. I'm actually gonna be out of town. Is everyone else planning on going?
I haven't gotten an invitation.
Okay.
I'm gonna be gone. I won't maybe be able to make it this year.
You might
What
be.
is that exactly?
It's the city's thank you to the boards and commissions for volunteering all your time. They will give you a couple of tacos.
And where's it gonna be at?
Hudson Gardens,
Okay.
right? Hudson Gardens, so you know.
Yep.
Just one other thing, I just want to make sure that everybody's tracking the public input, the public survey that is gonna be related to, people's opinions and what the future of the TMB Transportation Master Plan will be. And as we're working through this, we'll be open until the end of the process because the community very much values letting us know and letting everybody know. And I want to make sure that's always available. So we have made that possible till the end of this process.
So we talked to Shane about the idea of getting updates as new survey responses come in. Robert, any city council news would you like to share?
No, you heard we made the decision on the mineral mobility project. No, I think there's a lot of things going on, but I don't have anything. I think no, go ahead, you're good. Better I just be quiet.
I'll give you a 3 count to change your mind.
If I, what happens if I think of something, I'll interrupt later, so I know
We'll give you that card.
Thank you, I appreciate that grace that I do receive on this committee, so thank you very much.
Any board members have any comments or things they want to bring up before we get into the meat of this?
So.
I only have one comment. I didn't plan to make this, but I want to say, thanks, Robin, for coming. I appreciate you coming for a while now to our meetings. I appreciate your comments. They play very much, I don't think you were here last week, but they play very much into the, one of the things that I think is very important for us to address as a city and try to get into the update of the TNP, which is shifting we need to shift to a culture where everybody who's using our roads respects everybody else who's using our roads. We all have a right to be there. We all have a right to use them. Just because you're driving in a 4,000 pound steel box that could take everyone else out doesn't give you the right to push your way through everyone else. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I'm not sure how to solve that problem.
Right.
We're working on it.
The first step is addressing it and acknowledging it, and then we need to keep working on it.
Very good.
Yeah. Can I piggyback on that? I talked to Wes Marshall, so, and he is a teacher who has taught people in Littleton, so I think he does inform our decisions, just so you know.
All right, with that said, Aaron, take it away. Well, Shane.
Sorry, you get the second stringer.
Shane, take it away.
Let me get to the right tab here, and
I believe the reason we're talking about this is this is obviously something, another big part we've talked about for the TMP of really trying to update our street classifications, clarify it, make sure that we are all on the same page, and really, frankly, the city is all on the same page as to what our aspirations are for every street type of.
yeah, and so this is just kind of an explainer. And so this is one of the topics. It's at the extra meeting at the end of the summer in July. So this is kind of just an explainer on what those different things are. What is the difference between street types and roadways? How does that interface with land use? And then kind of talk about where they are in our TMP and kind of how far we've gone, but how we're not quite pushing where with the complete streets. That's where this whole thing is coming from. So it's not just me. So I know almost nothing about land use. So Jessica Stemley from our planning department is also on. If you want to introduce yourself, Jess.
Yeah, hi all. I'm homesick, so that's why I'm not there. So I apologize if I like cough or do any of those things while I'm talking, but I am the development engineering manager in the community development group. And my team is the engineering team that reviews all the development applications.
Yeah, so Jess will be able to speak kind of not just to the planning that we can speak to, but to like the actual engineering and some of the details. So. All right, so just kind of a quick overview, and I think we've touched on this, but just so we're all on the same page, what's the difference between roadway classification and street types? So the long and short of it is that roadway classifications purely focus on kind of how the roadway functions itself, what kind of cars it carries, how fast it carries them, and then how it functions as part of a network. The difference between roadway classifications and street types is that street types actually take into account the land use that's adjacent to the roadway. So for example, Prince Street in Littleton is a good example. So Prince Street is a neighborhood connector when you get south of Lake Avenue, because we've got, it's 2 lanes, it's got parking on both sides, might have a bike lane here and there. It's the same configuration south of Lake and north of Lake, but because north of Lake, the land use becomes more intense, it becomes a downtown mixed use street. Okay, so that's the difference there. So where the road class may be the same for the entire length of Prince Street, the street type would actually change on the portion of Prince Street. So does that make sense? These are some of the details, but the big difference is consideration of land use.
So as a designer, do you always take both into consideration? Like you have a roadway classification and street type for each street, or how do you?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in our TMP, we have our engineering group still uses roadway classifications, right? Like our CIP group, but as planners and as we're kind of thinking about these things, we're using the street types so that we take into consideration those land use. And how that comes into play is as we consider the cross section, that's when we'll kind of say, hey, if redevelopment takes place here, then you're going to have to put in the necessary facilities on that roadway if you're redeveloping that are part of that particular street cross section based on the street type. Yeah. Anything you want to add?
So am I hearing you right that where we are now, or at least where we're trying to go, is classification will be driven by street type, not the other way around?
So yeah, so we have roadway classifications, but really we're focusing on street type. And so that's what's currently in our TMP, and I can pull up an example of that, what our street types are in our current TMP. Yeah, that's our focus, is focusing on street type, not just roadway classification.
Clearly, do we have some sort of a map or a list of roads where the street type and the roadway classification conflict with each other?
Where they conflict with each other? Not really, because they're a little bit different things, right? So the roadway classification is going to speak to kind of like just how the road functions, right? The kind of volume it carries, stuff like that, and its function within the network. But the street type is going to tell you like, hey, because this is surrounded, right, by small shops or mixed use, things like that. On the outside of the roadway, we're going to prioritize pedestrian space and amenity space, and we might deprioritize the number of lanes we need if if it's downtown and we're trying to prioritize people walking.
Which certainly takes precedence over the other. Like if there's a roadway type that says it's supposed to be 35 through here for, volume, but there's neighborhoods and driveways and things like that. Do we currently lower that speed to match the street type, or do we just go with the roadway type?
Yeah, so speed is set. We're not like strictly setting speed based on kind of roadway type. And so here, let me share my screen and show you from the TMP what we have.
I think an example might be helpful.
Sure. So right here, this is from page 41 of our TMP. And so you can see kind of it gives a range of what a local street might be, right? So how wide it is, what the speed limit is, how many cars per day, or what the ADT is, lanes, all that sort of stuff.
And that's a classification, or that's
the street type? Yeah, this is the street type from our TMP. Yeah. And so kind of based on these things, this is where we would, when development comes in, this is kind of how we're determining the cross section, right? And so if we do have a street where it's identified maybe as a neighborhood connector, but for some reason, let's say the speed limit is 40 miles an hour, that would be something that we would consider as like, hey, this, the regulations on the street are out of line with our street type map and our TMP. So I don't know of any neighborhood connectors where the speed limit is that high, but just as an example. So.
How much of the TMP did they adjust street type to match roadway type? Because like 35 for a neighborhood connector seems really fast to me.
It does, yeah.
Was that to make that transition easier so you wouldn't have to go change roadway types in certain areas?
No, and some of this is kind of reflective of the current condition too. And so that was a consideration, is like we're taking in, that was the first time in 2019 we kind of looked at our overall network and said, how do we apply a street typology to Littleton? And so some of it is kind of explaining what we currently have. And no, it's not just necessarily to say like, hey, let's not make work for ourselves. But it's kind of to reflect what we have. And as part of the TMP update, let's see. And here we go. And so here's the map of those different street types. So as part of the TMP update, I mean, that's one of the things we need to consider, right? Is like, are any of these street types, you know, do they not make sense? Or better yet, from a policy level, since you guys are a policy board, do any of these ranges here on this list of streets, do any of these not make sense, right? Do we need to, you know, lower speed limits, right? Do we need to, and then when we get into cross sections, do we need to, are there things we need to change on the cross section that have an impact on the speed? So
So if we could, can we follow through on the neighborhood connector? Cause I apologize, I'm still struggling with typing classification. Sure. So we pick neighborhood connector. What's a good example of a neighborhood connector in
Yeah.
the city?
So neighborhood connectors are all these yellow ones.
Okay, so Ridge.
Ridge, right?
So Ridge Road, is a neighborhood connector. Speed limit on most of it's 30. Let's just say that that's like we say that we all decide as part of the new one, the neighborhood connector should, speed limit should never be higher than 25. Like that's our policy, right? What is the classification of Ridge? So street type is neighborhood connector. What is the classification of Ridge?
Yeah, so you know, I might refer to the engineers here. I would assume that it's a collector, right? So it's essentially, it's funneling cars in from these local streets and then getting you to the arterials, the minor arterials and the major arterials. So, and that's how it functions in the network, right? But that doesn't take into consideration land use or what's going on around it.
So is the definition of a collector, is there anything in there that conflicts with a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit? Is there anything that conflicts with a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit? On a collector, yeah.
The collector be 60.
That's what I'm asking, like, could a collector be 60 miles, like, if we change our policy, you say, no, we wanna be fast, we want fast, 60 miles an hour on Ridge. So what is in the, help me understand, unless you're gonna get to it in a second, like, what is the definition of a collector that prevents you from doing 60 miles an hour on it?
How it's designed. It's not designed to accommodate.
This is the engineering standards of it. It's not wide enough, it's not those types of things.
Yeah, sight distances, curvature of the roadway, whether it's vertical or horizontal, we got a lot of different factors.
Does this design fall under street type or classification?
Really, design doesn't work that way.
Okay.
You can design to a specific street type if you want. We don't really usually classify a road when we're designing it, more through this process, but yeah, it's mainly based on, we design a road right to the speed we kind of want it to be. And that's based on the land use around it, right? A lot of other considerations are you can have sidewalks along the bike lanes along it. What is the road used for? Is there on-street parking? Not how many access points, the density of access points, things like that, intersections, type of control.
Triangle, like roadway classification, street type and design. All sort of.
They all kind of work together, yeah.
So we've talked about the idea that you can have a road that's really, really big, it's at the speed limit of 25. And it's gonna be really hard to get people to do 25 because it feels so big. In the classification, so I'm gonna pick the connector, but in the connector classification, is there engineering standards that prevent people from going above 25 or make it extremely difficult to go above 25? Or is it more about like setting it's that we like, is it trying to figure out how do we get people to go, how do we design something so people can go as fast as they need to up to 25? But we're not really thinking about, well, they could probably do 45 because
So if I could interject, we're gonna kind of get to this with the rest of our present, like, so we're getting into, yeah.
it's slowing people down. Like are the design standards to slow them down in addition to allowing them to go certain speeds?
Yeah, so we'll get into like how kind of street type and all this stuff gets, yeah, so let us go back to that and then,
Thank you.
sure, no problem. Right.
It's like making a city council presentation. You can't get through 2 slides without.
Feel free to push back.
Perfect. So
You said you guys are easy.
I love that answer. I'm like, we're gonna get to that, I promise.
yeah, so, and there'll probably still be more questions, but yeah, so we just kind of talked about the difference and still that's a little bit unclear. To move the Zoom on the smaller screens, no problem. All right. So yeah, and this is kind of what we just went over. We looked at those pictures in that map, so I don't really need to kind of spend too much time on this, but these are the 6 different types of street types that we have in the TMP, right? And if we go back, and I can bring up that map in a second, but you'll see where you have one street, right, that goes across the city, and it'll be different colors at different points based on kind of the surrounding land use, right? So that's the difference, whereas roadway classification, it would change somewhat, but it'd be more based on kind of how that's directing traffic into the larger network. All right, so I'll turn it over to Jess here.
Yeah, so just want to give some background on how we got to the ULUC we have currently. And I want to preface that I was not here at Littleton when this happened. I've only been at Littleton about 9 months. So what I know, Envision Littleton, so the TMP, was created as the community vision, and that was implemented in 2019 or adopted in 2019. Due to that adoption and due to the comp plan being created to, give Littleton the vision that we have in that plan, zoning, subdivisions, our historic preservation code all needed to be updated to be in agreement with that plan, which is why we have the new ULUC that was adopted in 2021. So both of those documents align. So that's how we got to where we are with the ULUC. So we also, within the ULUC, there's content towards development to promote that walkable mixed use discussion we just had earlier. There's a lot in the code that we push developers towards during development. And then also the transportation adjacent issues, such as the frontages, pedestrian amenities, parking requirements, all of that is in the ULUC, and every development we apply the code to make those things possible. And then again, we have at the bottom there, we have a bunch of state legislation that's coming in right now. I think we just got a bunch this week that we need to look at. But the ADUs, our affordable housing, the density EVs are coming online, and then our transit-oriented communities, which is the TOC. So in addition to our code, we are also looking at all the state legislation that gets adopted and implemented, and how that fits within our code as well.
What's the EVs? Is that electric vehicles or is that something else?
Yeah, electric vehicles, yes. And the requirements the state's going to have for developers in the future, and how many EV spots we have to have, the infrastructure that needs to be in place, kind of that future proofing. It's going to start going into our building code here pretty soon. So developers are soon going to have to start putting in EV spots. So this is the main reason I think Shane brought me on, was the Littleton Engineering Design Standards. So currently the city of Littleton does not have an adopted engineering design standard document. Many of our municipalities, surrounding municipalities, have one that they have adopted. So currently me and Public Works and a couple of other people in Littleton are working on getting this through to council to be adopted as an official document in the fall of this year. Essentially, what this document is, it is entirely engineering and construction standards. It has nothing to do with policy. It is all engineering design standards. So as you see on this slide, it has just big high level. This document's like over 700 pages. So it's a massive document. But we have roadway and traffic signal design. That's going to be in there. Our concrete asphalt mix design for any of our projects. This includes developers, not private streets, but anything that they're doing in the public right of way. Storm and sanitary facility design, and then again, our construction standards and what our contractors will be responsible for during construction projects will be in this entire document. And it's just a good resource for us to point to for both CIP projects and development projects to say, this is what the city of Littleton expects when you design a project, when you're putting a signal in, when you're putting that concrete down on the sidewalk, when you're putting in that ADA ramp, this is what we expect. And so like, again, those pictures are showing that's what I'm trying to depict there. Is this is literally engineering and design. It has nothing to do with policy, which is what the TMP will focus on, is that transportation policy. This is, how do we build it? How do we maintain it? How do we ensure that we have a good product for the next 40, 50 years from our contractors, and for public safety as well, making sure we're designing things that are up to federal, state standards. And then if Littleton has any unique local standards, that will also go in there as well. But right now, what we do is we reference federal standards, we reference CDOT. And so instead of pointing everyone to those documents, we're just going to have it all in one document, and to make it easier for everyone and just go, you want to know how we want our asphalt, it's in the Littleton Engineering Design Standards. So that's what that document is. We're working on that right now. And like I said, we're already using all these standards. It's just to officially get it on paper and make it easy to point to for consistency and communication with our external partners.
So that's more about asphalt, concrete, and not necessarily paint on a street, or does it
Oh no,
also?
paint too. Paint too. I just didn't want to list all the all the elements of building a project. Yep. What kind of striping, everything. Everything on a project for construction.
So the TMP, if we're saying, here's how a bike lane should look like in the TMP, that would directly be reflected then in the.
Exactly.
Yeah, Shane, if you go to the next slide, I have a good example of that. Yeah, so how both of these documents fit together. I gave this presentation on LEDs to council, and a lot of questions were like how these documents work together. So I really wanted to show that to you all. So that first picture, and I know you're kind of far away from it, but that first picture is from the TMP in 2019. And it shows a cross section of that local street type you all were talking about. And it shows, our lane widths, what we want as a buffer, what we want for sidewalk, and so we have these for every single roadway classification in the TMP. What LEDs is going to do, it's the one underneath there, is going to be again that more in-depth design for engineers and for contractors to see, especially the engineering teams, the consultant teams. Here's what we want to see. And you can't see it, it's a little hard to see, but what I can point out is the TMP picture shows 8-foot wide lanes. And in LEDs, we've changed that to 10-foot wide travel lanes. We still have the 6 foot of parking. We have a 2.5 foot now concrete buffer. So it's a little bit different. So what we're doing in LEDs is kind of tweaking this a little bit to what we know and what we have currently, again, as Shane mentioned, with existing conditions and just kind of how we want to see things go. So we're doing this with every street type. Now, the beauty of LEDs is when the TMP changes, we will change LEDs. So when the TMP cross sections, if they change or if things change in there, LEDs will also change so that everything is consistent. And so again, we will have these for the I think it's not the neighborhood collector, but the other one with the bike lanes in it. Those will be in. So we will have cross sections to go to developers when they come in or at CIP projects and go in our lead standards. Mineral is a I'm gonna mess this up. Mineral is a arterial. I don't remember what our classification is for mineral. What is it, Shane? It's a what?
Suburban connector, that's the street.
Suburban connector. Thank you. Okay, everybody names their stuff different. Mineral is a suburban connector. You're going to build something on a suburban connector. Here's our cross section. And so if that requires bike lanes or multi-use pass, my team has something to point to that says, developer, you need to put this in because it's our standard. So that's how LEDs and the TMP are going to work together. And on the side there, I'm just showing you that the TMP, whatever policies come out of there, whatever projects come out of there goes into our CIP program. The TMP works with LEDs to tell people how to build those projects and how when we prioritize those projects in the TMP, the LEDs will tell them how to do that. And then again, LEDs is used to build CIPs as well. LEDs in the ULUC are what's used to help build those development projects. So that's how all these documents tie together. And what we're trying to do with LEDs, the TMP update, ULUC, is make sure everything's consistent and we're pushing the same message and the same vision that we want. And that's due to what gets put in this update with the TMP. So that's my overview, Shane, on everything. I don't know if you have anything else you want me to add on how LEDs and the TMP are connected here.
Can I ask you a question on what you just put here? So we had in the TMP that this is a local street should have 8-foot lanes. And yet the LEDs changed that to 10-foot lanes, so they're wider. And easier to go faster on as a vehicle, more space. Why would we increase lane width in the LEDs above what we called for in TMP?
Well, I would have to ask Kyle, honestly, on this, the transpo team. Aaron, you might be able to answer this, but the 2-foot increase with the parking on both sides shouldn't increase speeds. If you drive downtown Denver with parking on both sides, people are uncomfortable. They don't drive very fast because you have to dodge other cars and the parked cars. I think Some of it is due to not wanting that greenscape to be 8 feet. We have a 6 foot green space, so I think it's some of that maintenance on the landscaping piece of it as well. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe we took from the 8 foot of green space, we took it down to 6 and added that 2 feet of that 60 foot right away to the lanes. Aaron, I don't know if I'm misspeaking on why that changed, but I believe that's what it was the green space. We narrowed it.
Yeah, I mean, when we put the TMP together in 2019, we were taking typical cross sections and trying to just lay out how could it be utilized. And it's a higher level. It's more just looking at, okay, here's the different things you want. You want amenity space, you want a place for pedestrians, you want some landscaping, you have the roadway itself. You have to consider the whole right of way, not just the roadway area, right? When you're looking at a roadway. When we put the LEDs together, this came down to, okay, when we're actually constructing a street now, and we have this right of way, what is our typical section gonna look like? It doesn't mean we can't adjust from that, but this is what the typical section of a local street should look like to fit just your standard. And then everyone is different. Everyone, you have to take the context sensitivity on any given project to go, okay, we have exactly that right of way. Now, where do we pick and choose? You remember the exercise we did when we had all the different things you can consider right away? Yeah, it doesn't all fit, right? It rarely all fits. So then you gotta pick and choose what's the priority.
So is there some aspect here that our current TMP is not very clear about things like pedestrian and bicycle safety and slowing down, keeping traffic as slow as we can and still facilitate getting through town? And if the new TMP has that we wouldn't have LEDs come out and say, make lanes wider than we're calling for in the TMP?
No, I mean, 10 foot is still the minimum that we'd like to construct lane widths at. As the typical. There are always gonna be exceptions of a very low volume road that we might consider putting narrower streets on or narrower lanes. But in general, that's kind of the minimum we want to go down to, allow all vehicles to fit, because you gotta keep in mind, it's not just cars, right? Some of these streets have trucks on them too, whether it be delivery trucks or trash trucks or school buses and stuff. And 10 feet, we're kind of finding is the minimum that they can operate.
Where is that image on the top there in the TMP? Because I remember when I read the TMP, one of the first things I thought is that it lacked images like that. Yeah, and so I think these were developed after the TMP was adopted in 2019. We worked with HDR, who was the consultant, to kind of come up with some of these cross sections as we had, development come up. So they were not adopted as part of the initial TMP, but that's one of the things that we want to add, right, as part of this new TMP, as part of the update, because the first TMP was done in 9 months. Is that right? So we were trying to, cram some things in there, and so in retrospect, after that got adopted, we're like, oh, hey, it would be helpful to have some of these cross sections and other documents developed or other things developed.
Are there other amendments like that we could have access to?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are all, because this is all stuff we give to developers, right? So, yeah, I mean, no reason you guys can't have access to these. These are typically developer documents, but yeah.
And Aaron, just like something based on my personal knowledge, it's like a lot of when you design your street section, you're using technical manuals developed nationally, like the AASHTO Green Book and all these other things that have went through rigorous technical analysis to be what is safe, what is a common vehicle. That it's not something that is just come up on a fly. It is actually rooted in scientific studies and everything else that it takes to do quality and effective engineering.
Have you read Wes Marshall's book?
Yeah.
Because it pretty much counters exactly everything you just said.
And I guess my intuitive pushback without knowledge is that most of those engineering standards are probably built on what's safest for a car to drive through, not necessarily thinking that from a pedestrian or a bicyclist or a non-car using non-car user.
And I'm gonna put this as a water engineer, and I know Aaron is more transportation focused, but the engineering and design standards don't go into that avenue. They say if a vehicle goes down here, what is safe? They aren't saying that, trying to put all the other things. They're going, what is the minimum standard that a generic car can go through and be safe, period.
So I'm gonna ask you because you brought it up, but I'm not expecting you to answer. So I'll go to one of the comments that we got in public comment around Costco and Mineral, right? There's a lot around that. We're trying to put more active traffic on there, more bicycling, more pedestrians. So where in this whole process, and I assume it's probably lots of different places, do we, from a policy perspective, say we want Mineral be engineered to be safe? People who we want to walk and bicycle down Mineral. Yeah, we want we acknowledge we need to have vehicle traffic, but we want to make sure it's engineered so that pedestrians and cyclists can use it effectively and safely. Where do we take that in? That's the policy. Now, where do we implement that? How?
Well, first of all, that's an implication that anything we do isn't safe.
No, it's not. It's saying that that is the priority. It needs to be prioritized that all of those are, that their safety is amongst the highest priorities, actually the highest priority.
Providing separate space is the first and foremost thing that we try and do, right? Providing actual space for them to be. Using Mineral as the example, we're putting protected intersections at the new intersections that we're building, or that Costco is being forced to build, which separates bicycles from pedestrians, from vehicles. There's a lot of other things that go into protected intersections, such as the signal timing you adjusted, how you phase it. You might give bikes and peds leading intervals where they can get out first before any cars go, things like that, restricting right turns on red. Those are the type of things that we do at protected intersections to make them safer for pedestrians and bicycles and for cars.
So first of all, great answer. I appreciate you because that helps. I mean, hopefully it helps alleviate some concern. But my question is more from the way this whole process works.
Mm-hmm.
So if we say that's our policy, we want to make sure that pedestrian and bicycle safety and access and usability is important on Mineral. How do we do that in here? Put in the TMP, we say.
In the TMP, yeah, you go back to that classification, that type of road that Mineral is, and look at what Shane was showing you before, the different descriptors for it, how wide it should be, what the speed should be, what the volume should be, all of that. And you could adjust how much space should there be for pedestrians, how much space should there be for bicycles. Should bicycles always be outside the roadway as a cycle track, or is it okay that they're in the roadway? So there's things that you can fit into that in the ranges and things that you set up in the descriptions that would guide.
In the TMP, and then new LEDs would be released to, assuming that there's changes. The LEDs would then reflect so that vision from the TMP can actually be put out to bid and clearly put in design standards. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then how does the ULUC fit into that?
So the ULUC is with land use code. My understanding, and Jess, tell me if I'm wrong, but LEDs is to the TMP what ULUC is to the comp plan, right? So it's like, here's your policy doc. And then, ULUC and LEDs is like, this is your engineering standards, your implementation, like how it needs to look, right? What's the mix of the asphalt? Or in the case of ULUC, like what's the makeup of the building? What's an allowable use? Things like that.
Setbacks. Yeah, different uses you can have, different requirements. Yeah.
So I don't know this. I mean, this is all hypothetical. I'm not saying we're gonna do this, but if we decide to go trying to be very radical in the TMP and change things a lot. Sounds like we would also need to go back to the comp plan and try to figure out ways to get those to align with each other. Or potentially, because land use, I mean, I don't know what it looks like on Mineral, but I could see a situation where we say, we need to have huge setbacks, so we have lots of room for pedestrians, bicyclists, and it may conflict with what's in the comp plan, right? You see as a result.
So if there's another development, right, let's say there's another Costco. Right.
Yeah.
That's not
Next
going to
door.
Right. Yeah. So the next big development, right? If we have something in the TMP, right, that says this is the street type, these are the facilities we expect, then we can ask that developer to dedicate right away to that without changing what the land use is necessarily. So we can't update street types if we feel like they're incompatible with the land use to reflect that, but we don't need to change the land use code to get in our TMP update to get the facilities that we would like to see on certain street types.
And one thing you're not seeing here in the cross sections is the ones that were developed after the TMP don't just have a standard cross section, they also have alternatives off to the side. So like if you wanted to be more of a transit oriented roadway and you want to put buses on there, here's what you would adjust to make that fit. If you want to do cycle tracks or higher level bicycle accommodations, here's how you would change the cross section. So that's kind of off to the side on each of those.
If we used Ridge Road as an example, what is the cross section that our current TMP says Ridge Road should look like? And then you guys have talked a lot about, these are the things you give to developers. Well, there's no developers on Ridge Road, so how does that actually happen? Even if you've made a cross section, who's actually gonna do that work? Is it gonna be Littleton? Is it gonna be a requirement of the people that live there?
And that comes back to city council, what their priorities are for what we do as projects. So, you know, what the steps we would typically take to change a road like Ridge Road. We look at the TMP, we then go into a corridor study where we're looking at what are the uses along that roadway and what do we want it to be in the future? What do we want to change, if anything? Do we want to have more accommodations for pedestrians and bicycles that we need to put in that right of way? Do we want curb all the way along it? Or do we like having some areas where it's, the drainage just goes into a ditch? We want on-street parking all the way along it or not? I mean, a lot of these street corridor, the one we just started, is a good example of how that we're gonna go through that process where we first look at, okay, what is along the roadway? Then we start meeting with people along the roadway within the city going, what do we want this to be in the future? You know, we've identified there's a couple schools along it. Is that the priority? And if so, okay, how are we accommodating those students? Are we putting them on wider sidewalks? Are we creating shared use paths? Are we creating separate bike lanes? Those are the type of decisions that would go into that corridor study as a collective group to decide. And I mean, a lot of you might not be the best example because I just saw the stuff that our consultant worked on, and they're breaking into a lot of segments, right? Because it's not the same along that whole corridor today. So it's hard to just say you're going to switch it to this. It might be a combination of things, right? One neighborhood might say, we don't want any bike lanes and we don't want any sidewalks. That's our choice. We don't want it through our area. Then we have to decide as an agency, okay, it's still our public right of way. So is that serving the community as a whole the best? Or is it just serving that neighborhood? And that's the balance that we'll have to work through.
Yeah, and Matt does have a question, so I don't wanna, he's had his hand raised patiently for a while.
I lowered it. It was answered. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I know Matt asked this question last week, but I think it should be asked again. Like I had to pour a new driveway at my house and I got a quote to put a 4-foot sidewalk in front of my house because I thought that would be required. And then comes back that that's not required in Littleton, where it's like required in every other city I've ever been in. So why isn't that required if we have a street use and a roadway classification and these universal land use codes? Why aren't we putting this on homeowners when they do projects to get it up to standard?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if you know the details of that.
I mean, because
for my neighborhood, I'm absolutely not voting for required sidewalks because I don't want to get reelected. So,
Well,
but those are our choices.
Well, the question, I'm gonna restate his question slightly, which is, if we have code, if you build a street, our street should have these things on it, and if I'm gonna go change, if someone's gonna change, me, a developer, anyone, the city is gonna go make a change. Like in every other way, like in my house, if I make a big change in my house, I have to bring it up to code.
Yeah.
I can't just like say, oh, well.
If it wasn't required for your house in Littleton, it's because the city council didn't require it.
Well, and that's, I guess, what we required of a developer, but not a homeowner.
Right.
And so if you have a ridge road that has no development on it and never.
That's right. And I think that's why Shane said, that's how, then what Ridge Road looks like in the future, if it changes, is based on how much money city council is able to put into it.
So we don't have anything like that.
So am I hearing you correctly? And that the reason, the answer to Josh's question is because we literally have laws or code in the city that say you have to bring your house up to code if you're gonna change it, but you don't have to bring your driveway or your sidewalk up to code if you change it.
That is my interpretation of what he just said. Because if it's not required, then the council didn't require it. I mean, that's what we do. We write the ordinances.
Required of like everything else, like
So you don't go from 3 to 6 to 3 to 6 on the same sidewalk?
Well, that's what I'm saying, like, so if we have this vision, this cross-section for a particular street, and somebody's gonna re-pour, why wouldn't we require them for the vision plan to do that?
You can,
That's what we do in Denver.
that could be your recommendation to council.
Okay, but that,
All right, we can move on.
Yeah, better question would be, it's like, how are normal practices that would engage in like levels of upgrade, levels of build? Because I know you could have like somebody buys and builds a new house, then they build something. You could have an amount of improvements and then you improve something. Or like with street maintenance, like say you do a mill and fill and you have to improve certain elements. How would that?
Yeah, what's the threshold?
yeah, that's a little bit.
All right. So, and yes, these are an example of these kind of fleshed out, these cross sections. So like, as Aaron was saying, there's kind of these different options. And so this is also, this is a typical or an ideal cross section. So there, so like what we don't want to do is set the expectation is like, hey, this is, you know, every neighborhood connector is going to look like this. One, as we mentioned, right, we have to have the funding to do it. There also might be some circumstances where even if there is redevelopment, they're only responsible for their chunk, right, of the roadway and their side of the roadway. So we can't like force the person across the street to relinquish part of their right of way as part of that, right? We don't want to have like the road jog over for one block and jog back just so we can have, you know, 6-foot sidewalks and a tree lawn, right? So there might be some variability in this, but this is kind of the ideal thing that we would shoot for. And there's, yeah, one of these for, there's different overlays too in our TMP for transit back when transit was hot and heavy pre-pandemic, so.
There actually was transit.
Yeah.
Is it was transit or people use transit?
Yes.
A little bit of both. Look on B.
So that's kind of all the slides we had. There was just kind of some, the next one was our end one for this section. It was really just kind of asking some questions that we've already been discussing, which is, you know, where are the gaps? Yeah, is there anything you didn't understand? Where are the gaps? And then what would be helpful to kind of determine here at this meeting so that we can have a better, more informed conversation. I said June here, but I think it's actually July when we dive into the street type recommendations.
I think, is that you and Matt who are working on that one together? So I'll let you guys take the lead on any question. I mean, you're the ones that.
It's a complex subject.
Yeah.
I actually think, and Matt, I don't know if you agree with me, but like, would it be possible to have a one-on-one meeting with you guys, the two of us and some of staff to really talk about this kind of stuff? All right, Aaron's out. Shane,
Aaron's calendar opens up in November.
In November.
It does sound like it's a very complex issue around street types and classifications and then all the nuance that might be in an individual street.
Well, and don't forget, we're talking about a community that's been around for 130 plus years, right? How many streets do you drive down Littleton where you get to an intersection, all of a sudden the road went from here to over there? Like,
Yeah.
what the hell? Yeah. I mean, things like that, how do you address those? And then you have neighborhoods that decided not to put any sidewalks and bike lanes in them. Now what do you do? Because now the space isn't there. So, you know, and the drainage might have been set up differently, so it's not as easy as just going and putting in a sidewalk or something, because you could have to redo all the drainage that goes with it also. So it's definitely a balance with costs. And the other complication with all these roadways we're talking about right now, which are kind of internal to the city, we can't get any federal funds for those. It's really really difficult to.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say we can't, but
Yeah,
it's very rare.
It doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
do that.
The money we can usually get is for the bigger roadways and stuff, right? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize our grant effort on the bigger roadways, which is a lot of the projects we have going on now, so that we can now then focus as much energy and funding in the future on these internal roadways.
So the street types that are recognized in the current TMP, are those like a national standard, or is this something that we made for our own TMP?
We designed them for us to be Littletonized.
If we could have more, less, more defined versions, less defined versions, and things, and everywhere in between.
Yeah.
So we'd be more dynamic with the TMP if we want.
And Dr. Cog, which is the MPO for the region, they have a complete streets toolkit that they came up with a few years ago. And so they actually worked with us because we're one of the few communities that has street types to kind of determine those on a regional basis. So they don't dive down to the local level as much, but that's one thing to consider too as we update our TMP is making sure, we evaluate that document. Are we in agreement with it? Hopefully if we, contributed to it, but maybe something radical has changed and we want to do something different. So, So the names are simple, to.
Am I remembering correctly that we are potentially going to have like neighborhood bike connectors, or we're having a bike connection study, and that could potentially be a new form of a new classification of like, a lottie may be a neighborhood connector, but it may also be identified as a specific path for people to get places on bikes, as part of like no one in the city is more than this distance away from a dedicated protected bike path. So could we make a new classification based on something like that? Would that make sense?
Yeah, we could. And actually, Shane and I were just talking about something similar to that today. We were talking about we're going to adjust.
Yeah, we have these bike priority streets, but they don't feel prioritized right now.
Well, we don't have a definition of what it means. Right. So that's one of the things we talked that you guys need to do. That's part of your job for.
Would you guys be open to like compound street types where you can say, this is a neighborhood connector, this is what that means for cars, but this is also a bicycle commuter street, this is also a pedestrian commuter street, like.
And they all need to go together.
They all need to go together, rather than saying, having like 45 different versions, we can just do the math and add these things together, which is that a possibility?
Yeah, and so this is a good thing to, kind of put in our scope of work as we look for a consultant to do this in 2026 is so we have these priority streets, we have these street types right now. So these are kind of like overlays on top of the street types, but Jeff is right. We don't really define what that means. And like, for example, so Mineral, for example, is a bike, pedestrian, and transit-oriented street. And unless you have 150 feet of right-of-way, those things at some point are going to come into conflict and you're going to have to pick. So how do you prioritize the priorities? So yeah, these are all things that we need to figure out. So yes, yeah.
And Josh and I were discussing how, there like we could have, in the grid, the table of the classifications, a like prioritization spectrum, on for each of these different classification types, showing like, if this is a neighborhood connector that is also identified as a bike path, then when those trade-offs have to occur, these are the ways that we choose those trade-offs, based on these priorities that we've identified as a city.
And then Derek and I had a great conversation around like so many of our streets without sidewalks that have bike lanes. The bike lanes are now sidewalks. So you see a lot of strollers and walkers and scooters out in the middle of the road, essentially, where they're really truly not safe unless they're moving at a speed that's half of traffic, right? Like, so recognizing that as well as like putting that pedestrian focus, like, well, if we're only gonna have a bike lane, we need to assume it's also a pedestrian lane. How do you say that?
Well, I mean, I in my head, and it's very simple in my head, way simpler in my head than it is in reality. But in my head, that's why we have bike priority streets, and then the next page was
Pedestrian priority.
Pedestrian priority, right? So some of it is getting messy. If we really can start creating it that way, some of it is the messaging to the pedestrians of like, hey, like you need to go like this is not a safe place for you to be walking, but one block over, it's designed for you to walk.
I look forward, go to a Lottie and do where it goes through my neighborhood and have this conversation.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
This is it.
Neighborhood?
Yeah,
Well,
because it's a no sidewalk, it's a bike lane, it's parking and it's driving. And
so I'm gonna be very candid about your neighborhood.
yeah,
There's a couple of things. It's not really a place we need to go through, that most people need to go through to get anywhere. It is actually designed to make it very difficult to do that.
but a Lottie is how people get to Heritage.
So there's a part of me that feels like we can allow some opening to neighborhoods saying, we don't care about pedestrian and bike safety in our neighborhood. Like, if you want to be safe walking and riding your bike, like, don't come here. Matter of fact, I was talking to somebody who lives over in Coventry the other day, and they said that literally, like, they recently moved there. They've got little kids. They sent a note out to the whole neighborhood thing saying, hey, like, we don't have sidewalks and kids are playing in the street, maybe people could slow down a little bit. And they got hate mail. They got literally people saying like, watch your kids, keep your kids out of the street. And so like if a neighborhood says, we are, kids are in danger in this neighborhood, don't come here. We may need to leave that open and make it very clear. Maybe like, there's a big like, no kids in this neighborhood sign in the beginning or something. I don't know.
I do want to.
One of the original people who platted out my neighborhood got hit by a car walking on the streets.
In your neighborhood?
Yeah, one of the original people who platted out Aberdeenville.
Irony or is that karma?
Either way.
I do want to say, like we and I know Pam has talked about this a lot about like parallel routes and things like that. And, for instance, the Broadway corridor study has been done, and we're going to hopefully have some great infrastructure on Broadway at some point, but that might be decades away. And Eladi is the main north-south corridor, for people like in my neighborhood. If I want to go to King Supers, I will ride my bike up Eladi, and then turn at that four-way stop to go over to King Supers. And there is no other way. There is no direct path because all those neighborhood streets are kind of perpendicular and none really go north-south there. And so I don't really think Aberdeen Village should be able to say, we are dangerous, don't ever come through our neighborhood, and like I think that we have to look at that as an overall grid, an overall network, and how does Eladi play into that? And I think that that's pretty important. Even if people are anti sidewalk, it's like if it's a neighborhood connector, it's a neighborhood connector, regardless of the people there's desire to have nothing change.
Although when I would ride my bike in Aberdeen Village, I actually felt safer riding on that street with no sidewalk and no lines and no bike lanes because it had no lines, no bike lanes, and no sidewalk. Where Eladi is just confusing as hell. You go from Sharrow to double yellow lines where people don't give you berth. They get behind you and honk their horn at you instead of like just going around. In Aberdeen Village, they just go around you. And so I wonder how that plays in to the comfortability of the TMP as well, because Eladi looks like a highway and I think people treat it like one. So.
No, I think I'm excited about the study. It's going to come up with some really tough problems to deal with.
I think this does bring up a question that I have, Aaron. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I can't remember how long ago, you were mentioning that one of the main parts of, I think, the LEDS stock, the lead stock, is the level of service for streets, and that cities really pay attention to those levels of service. And I wonder, like, is it somewhat contradictory to say this is a local neighborhood street, and so we're trying to slow cars down? For instance, the street that Josh lives on is no one ever, like, people very rarely travel through his street as like a throughway. Is it contradictory to say we need this street to be able to service as many vehicles as possible, as fast as possible, while also saying this is a local street where, if you are driving on the street, you should view yourself as the guest if kids are playing in the street, and be driving slowly and have it more truly be like a residential street and not we're trying to get people through as quick as possible.
Yeah, and so in LOS level of service is typically more for your higher classification roadways, rather than like your neighborhood street. I don't know of a single study we've done where we're looking at like level of service of like, two neighborhood streets intersecting. But where like at the larger intersections where we look at level of service and things like that, like, so we're looking at Broadway and Mineral, and Broadway and Littleton. And one of the things we're considering is like, coming out of the Broadway corridor studies, we want to provide all these extra facilities. And we also looked at like, well, what if we take away a right turn lane or take away a left turn lane? There's, like with traffic calming, like anything else, there's a law of diminishing returns where you can, especially these busy intersections, calm so much to the point where they become dangerous. And I don't know if you've been on like Santa Fe and Alameda over, I think it was last summer, they were doing construction. And so it was backed up in all four directions. And I mean, every day on my way home, I saw people driving over medians and, and cutting through parking lots at 25 miles an hour to flip a U-turn, right? So that's kind of where LOS comes into play. I don't know if that answers your question, but so in certain areas we consider LOS, but yeah, not on neighborhood streets. Our goal is not to move cars as fast as possible. As fast as possible is never the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know of some municipalities, and I don't know if Littleton ever did this, but they kind of just auto incremented the speed limits up, at 5 miles per hour or whatever the case may be to try to get it as fast as possible. And I don't think that's a good approach. I think that that makes less safe roads. And I don't think Littleton does that, but just wondering how those necessarily compete. Like, if people come down from Starbucks on Broadway down through my neighborhood, Easter Ave and Fremont are the ways that people get to Runyon and to Heritage High School. And so even though those feel like residential neighborhoods, and they are residential neighborhoods, but they are also network connectors, and so there's like some play there. Whereas Josh's street is absolutely not a throughput kind of street, for getting people to where they need to go.
Only low riders to going to the high school use my street because I have no speed bumps. But that was very informative and.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from board on? All right.
Yeah, and Matt and Josh, if you guys want to reach out to me or us and we can get something on schedule. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Sounds good.
Time check, the Elati corridor, what is the shortest amount of time you think we can easily get through that part, that presentation?
Well, that is certainly up to you guys. So I'll give you kind of an overview. So where we're at in the Elati corridor studies, we've just kind of started. Staff just got our first draft of like the existing conditions today to start reviewing. So my goal with the presentation was just to kind of give you guys an overview of the project, talk about the upcoming public engagement opportunity that'll be kicking off next week, and then just talk about like how you guys want to be involved in a board or as a board, excuse me. So that was my goal. So
20 minutes should be reasonable.
I would think so, but that's really up to you guys, so.
If we're done with the street types, can we let just go?
Oh, yeah, I think we're done.
Yeah, thanks, Jess.
Thank you very much, Jessica.
Thanks for your time.
Yep, bye y'all.
All right, so next item is to talk about. Wait, what's that?
I was just telling Aaron, thank you for letting Jessica go. Sorry.
Is talk about communications plan. So we talked a little bit about this. I feel like maybe I should wait for Josh, but we won't. We talked about this at the study session last week. In fact, I addressed it a little bit earlier. In talking to David, he was very, guy who's an expert in his field. He actually had made some really good points. He's like, if you're going to put together a communication plan, you kind of have to have a sense of what's your objective with it? Where are you trying to go? And so he said, well, what is your objective? And I kind of said, I don't know that I can clearly articulate it in this moment. Obviously TMP update is more of a shorter term objective of trying to communicate what we're doing there. But I think there's some longer term, bigger mountains out there that we want to climb with this. So I would like to have a little bit of a conversation. I'd like to set aside, since we talked about 20 minutes, I'd like to set aside about 10 minutes to just go around real quick and get people's thoughts on the board. If they have any thoughts on where do you think about what we should be communicating out to the public? What are our priorities and goals, so that we can start pulling something together and getting David that what he needs to help us. A big part of that, the way I was talking about I'm one of the mountain metaphor guys, right? So we talk about a goal. I was talking about like, you gotta figure out which 14 are you trying to climb. And then there's obviously there's different mileposts along the way. Well, in order to get to that, we gotta get to the park trailhead first, and then we gotta get to this little ridge line, and then we're gonna cross, and then we'll go up to Speed Field, and then we'll drop over this false summit and back over. So we have to establish those timelines as well. But I think it's important for us to try to identify that 14er. What do we want to try to accomplish with our communications and talking to the public, talking to other boards, talking to city council, and communicating out what we're doing. So I'm gonna let you start.
All right.
You have some thoughts.
So one thing that is very important in any public facing item is to engage with the community, to make sure the community is informed, to bring them into the discussion and the process, because there's been a lot of things where I have heard constantly, we didn't know that happened. I didn't know what was going on. Why is that happening? the more and more that we can come out and eliminate that and make sure that the community is informed so that they can bring their feedback in is of utmost critical importance to have success in what we do. And as we move into the future, it's like, we'll have the TMP. The TMP is gonna help guide the future of Littleton's transportation. Then you're gonna move into major projects. You're gonna move into eventually some engineering standards are gonna follow the TMP. So we wanna make sure that the community knows when they see a construction crew, when they see a city staff, when they see a sign go up, they're not saying, why is that there? They're saying, I either agree or disagree, or I support or not support, but they're all a part of the conversation. And that's pretty much all of my thoughts on it.
So informing and educating the community on the way the process works, starting a lot of basically we talked about there, right? TMP drives, standard drives, and drives projects.
So this be something that's like in the Littleton report?
Early.
Well, the communications plan is bigger, that it's like, I think we could use, I mean, that's one of the, to my mind, that's one of the tools we use to get it out there. So the Littleton report would be one, public interactions, the kind of stuff would be one. We've talked about, and I can't remember if you and I have talked about this or not, but we've had multiple conversations over the last year or two about trying to work closer with some of the other boards and understand where we have commonality and overlap and try to see what we can work together there. So that would be another area that we'd be communicating. And I'm sure there's more as well that I'm not thinking of.
Yeah.
Michael, thoughts?
Well, I guess I thought when we first started discussing this, that it was really centered around the TMP. Like we wanted to get input and goes both ways, but this sounds like a larger endeavor that's maybe not just the next 6 months, but beyond. Am I getting that?
Well, I think it's bigger than, I think the TMP is one of those, we talked about kind of getting up to the 14er. I think the TMP is a big one of the big kind of milestones along the way, and certainly something that is shorter term that we need to be focused on. But I think that we should be on that.
Okay.
Like maybe the TMP is a 14er, but the process we put in is the endurance to say, I want to do the next one and the next one and the next one. We have a training program per se to make it all happen.
Kind of like a policy for this board that just helps with transparency and communication to the public.
I'm almost thinking it was like it's like our TMP for like how we go out and talk about it when it's time to go talk to people, right? It's like, here's our playbook, here's what we do.
It's like, I mean, that's a hard business. Getting in touch with people.
Yeah.
So,
not one of my strong suits.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful to have some experts who are willing to help us. Robert, I'm curious if you have any input on this.
On your communications plan? Well, I guess I agree with no, I don't feel like I have a lot of input, but I do agree with I think it's easier to think about it as what do we need to do to communicate, to do our work for the update to the transportation master plan and frame, that feels like a much easier framing than so that's not city council member input, that's just observing your conversation input.
Okay. All right. One of the things we had talked about is, remind me when Jessica started, the new communications director recently, right?
Recently.
Yeah, like a month ago.
Okay, so a month ago. So we have a new communications director in the city. We talked about having her come and meet with our upcoming meetings, hopefully relatively soon. Is that something that you guys would be interested in? Makes sense. Okay, good. Derek and I will take these comments and thoughts and pull them together and work with David to start pulling together the skeleton of what the plan looks like and report back. Any comments, thoughts? All right. Let's talk about Lottie. All right, you know, I didn't give Matt a chance to, I'm sorry, I just saw his face up there. Matt, was there anything you wanted to say?
No, I'm good.
All right. I have one request on this for incorporate. You don't need to answer right this second. As part of this, can you help us understand a little bit about what is it, how the study is done in such a way where we avoid tunnel vision on a Lottie and make sure we're thinking about how a Lottie fits into our overall system and plan?
Sure. I can answer that from the start if you'd like. So
Wherever you want.
part of that is continuing to reference the TMP, right, which has that overall vision. Even though we're getting ready to update it next year, right, it still kind of has a future vision that we would look to. We also are aware, so there's 10 other corridor studies. This is kind of our first not test, but this is the first study that we're doing, and we're trying a different approach. We have a grant application into the feds to study 10 other corridors. We don't know the status of that. We'll find out in July. So we got some, even though the funding talk has been not great, we got some inside baseball information today that perhaps there actually is going to be some more funding come out, but that the current, Sean Duffy is trying to kind of get everybody organized with less staff and stuff like that. So it seems like maybe there's, some hope for government grants. So anyway, so a Lottie corridor study. So I kind of give you guys an overview of where we're at in the project, but here is where the project is looking at. So up at the north there, this map is a little cut off so you can see some of it, but that's Littleton Boulevard. There is a Lottie north of Littleton Boulevard, but it skips a block. And so that top terminus is a little bit kind of squishy right now, but we know we want to make sure we connect to Littleton Boulevard. There's another Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan is kicking off soon. So, we'll definitely coordinate with that. We're on different timelines. And then down at the south is the Highline Canal Trail. So if you're familiar with that part of Lottie, after you go past the Lee Gulch Crossing and Getty's, there's 2 more blocks down there, and that's where we'll end making a connection there to the Highline Canal Trail. So I think Aaron mentioned this earlier. There's 5 different segments of the Lottie of the corridor, and so I think when we walk the corridor with the consultant, I think this feels kind of very much in line with the experience when you walk the corridor. And so these segments are from Littleton Boulevard to Cayley, Cayley to Euclid, Euclid to Ridge, Ridge to Bradbury, and then Bradbury to Getty's, and then that last section is Getty's South. So, and they're a little bit, each a little bit different. So it's 2.5 miles. The idea is to, look at how do we allow a Lottie to be a street where people can travel up and down it safely, regardless of what mode they choose to travel in. We're also using this as an opportunity to determine modal prioritization. So that's one of the things we've been talking about with the TMP is that we have these, these priority streets, right? But there's inevitably going to be times when we have to make a decision. We have to say, hey, we don't have room for everything, so what rises to the top? And so we want to come up with a framework in the study on how we do that and apply those to the other corridors. So that will build on what's already been done in the TMP. It won't kind of overdo it or anything like that. There's also going to be a very thorough emphasis on public engagement. So initially with Safer Streets, the idea was to go out and get things down to the ground. And now that we're in year 2 of Safer Streets, right, we know that that's generally that's just not good planning practice. Like you go back and look at the history of planning of planners and Robert Moses going in and just doing things because he thinks it's best, right? And then we live with the consequences of that for decades or centuries. So there's going to be a big emphasis on public engagement, more so than we've done kind of with Safer Streets intentionally, right? With that engagement phase first, and probably more so than we've done with corridor studies, because unlike a Broadway, right, or a Mineral, like people's houses are fronting up here, so it very much impacts people's everyday life. This is not kind of the complete scope of work, but this is just kind of some highlights from it. So the idea is to go, the timeline right now is from March to December of 2025. That is a short timeline. So the idea is not that we want to cut anything off just to meet an arbitrary timeline, but the idea is that we want to, kind of get things down, get things moving, and help to set the stage for the TMP update. So that's why we have the December deadline right now. Public stakeholder engagement. So We're not just kind of doing the typical like open house where we spend $800 to print foam core boards and 8 people show up and then, we base all of our project feedback on that. We actually have many levels of engagement. So we'll be engaging with you guys. And that's one of the questions we have at the end is how do you want to be engaged with? We also have scoped out with the consultant to have 2 presentations to council, and whether council, wants us to come and talk about this project specifically or delegate that to you guys and have you guys provide a report. We'll follow, whatever the both bodies' directions on that. We're going to engage with residents, obviously. We're especially going to look at the opinions of residents who live on a lottie. So our first engagement that's going to be coming up here next week. One of the questions we ask is we ask you, the people filling it out, to drop a pin on where they live so that we can understand, hey, are the opinions of the people who live on a lottie, are they, or even close to a lottie, are they much different than the other people who are providing input? So. And then we've already started engaging with students. So we have a student ambassador program with Heritage High School where we had 13 students sign up. We met with some of them at a few weeks ago. A lot of them had, sports ball practice, but the idea is that we're going to be engaging students to see, what do students think of a lottie, right? Like if you go to Heritage, if you go to Runyon, if you go to Euclid, you're on a lottie a lot. So what is your experience of a lottie? Because there's probably experiences they have that we would never pick up just, being out there in the field, right? Because they use it every day. But the idea is that we're gonna rely on students to provide that information. Hopefully, also rely on their social media expertise to make us cool and hip and get the word out there to other fellow teens about this project and get their experience. And then in return for this, we're going to provide them a letter of recommendation from the city. So if they want to, use it for college or some sort of internship or whatever is next in their career, there's some trade-off there. Some modal priorities, we talked about that there. And then one of the things that we don't want to do with our studies is just have a nice study that looks really good on paper and then we do absolutely nothing with it. So we're taking the opportunity to do some 30% design in our scope with the consultant right now. We have it says longo term. Anyways, we have 30% design at 5 locations scoped out. So throughout the study, we'll identify areas where they might be the areas that need the most attention because of a safety concern. There might be an area that we identify as low hanging fruit. And so we'll go to 30% design, which will set us up for future funding. As Aaron mentioned, these internal streets don't usually have a lot of opportunities for funding, but we're advancing the ball a little bit to get to the next step. So not just doing a study. So. Any questions on some of the scope items?
So what is this first, what is the first stakeholder engagement? But that's the next slide, so I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, so these are some of the project outcomes. So we looked at the scope, but these will be the things that come out of it. So an existing conditions fact book, which we just got the first copy of, and so we'll release that once we review it and provide comments, and an interactive GIS map. So we know that as people are online more, that even though we need a printed kind of existing conditions book, that an interactive map where people can go interact with it is much more enticing. It gets a lot more people to be involved in the project than just kind of something that's printed. So modal priority memo, that's again just going back, how do we determine modal priorities, quick build projects, and then 30% design and final reports. So so there'll also be quick build too. So we're gonna have this design available, but also especially if there's areas that are immediate safety issues, how do we use some of our temporary materials to try to address those? So I think is the last one. The next one is the last slide. But yeah, I can't talk about the public engagement, which is the next slide. So the public engagement will be a virtual public engagement, a self-guided online meeting. And so we found that this is one of the best ways to get more people to interact. So like I said, kind of the traditional open house, we don't get a lot of people to come to. We also found that kind of just like doing a survey without any context doesn't really engage people well either, because we'll have, in the free form comments section when we read it, we're seeing people and say, well, I don't like this, I don't like that. And we're like, oh man, we didn't do a good job of explaining what this study is actually about. So the self-guided online meeting will actually kind of be a chance for people to step through at their own pace, read about what the project is, and then ask them questions about this section or this part of the project. And so for this first public engagement, it's going to really be about what is your big idea for a lottie? Like if you, were king for a day and a lottie, was your kingdom, what would you make it look like to make it look like, the perfect transportation corridor? And then also ask what are the values, right? So we have the TMP has kind of a set of goals, and so that's what we're kind of basing it off of. But what do those goals look like when they're kind of put into fruition on a lottie street? So that was a lot.
That was a lot. That goes live in a few days, so.
It does, yeah. So this says May 26th through June 2nd. So we just heard from the consultant today that they need a couple more days. So we're actually going to release it on May 29th and then extend it to at least the 25th. We'll also be at the Q Plus Farmers Market on June 1st, which is a Sunday. So it'll be me, Kenna, and then a couple of the folks from the consultant team with some tablets there if you guys want to come and learn about it and fill out the survey, things like that. So.
How are you gonna communicate about this?
Yeah, to just the project.
How do people find out about
Yeah,
that?
so that's good. Yeah, so that's kind of the other kind of box here up in the top left. So we already have a project page that's been set up, and I can show you that. That gives information about the project, and it also has a form at the bottom so that anybody can go and sign up for project updates, but can't talk and type at the same time. But we'll be going through all the normal channels, so social media, LRP, LRO, things like that, as well as attending events. So, and I can pull up the scope and we can get into details, but it's not kind of just that stuff, but it's showing up at pop-up events, right? It's showing up at council meetings, engaging with students, doing a walk audit of the corridor, things like that. So it's a pretty real thing with students.
What's that? How are you engaging with students?
Yeah, so right now it's primarily through the Student Ambassador Program, right, through Heritage High School. But we also have scoped out to attend, to do some public engagement events at parent-teacher conferences. So when LPS already has events that are going on where we know there's going to be students and parents, we want to show up at those and just provide, even if it's just information like, hey, here's a quick flyer about the study we're doing. You can go here and learn more. And if you want to, fill out the survey, if that's the time when the survey is open, then you can come do it right here.
It's summer now, so like, those aren't happening until way after June.
Right.
How are you going to engage with LPS and students in the meantime?
Yeah, so we met with LPS yesterday to kind of ask about that. And so we think over the summer to like engage with LPS directly, it's probably going to be coordinated with their social media, the person who controls their social media, to have them kind of repost the things that we do. But yeah, there won't be a whole lot of direct engagement, but we've already engaged with students at Heritage, and then we're planning on showing up at events in the fall. So, yeah, and so go.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I would also throw out that we're already talking LPS. You probably got one more newsletter before the end of the year from Runyon, Euclid, and Heritage. Just reaching out to their person and just saying, can you put a link in there?
Yeah, and so we asked them about that. They said we're a little late for that, so, yeah.
You guys ever, call the PTOs?
Yeah.
They're the ones that actually send out newsletters. It's not the school. The school does 4 a year, and PTOs do 1 a week.
Okay.
And I'm the PTO president in Runyon. I'll be doing one on Sunday. So like, you guys get those links out to people. That's the true community, not Marcy at LPS.
My wife sends them out for Euclid as well, so I have a connection there too.
Exactly. So perfect. I'm glad we had.
I feel really bad because literally my youngest son is graduating from Littleton on Saturday, so I'm done.
Yeah.
This is the first time I ever heard there's actually PTO that sends that weekly newsletter. I always thought it was the school that does that.
No. It's always been the PTO.
All right.
We'll also be mailing flyers too. So we have some like postcards that will be going out in the mail, right? So that way we can, and those will be kind of focused on, immediately on Alati and kind of the surrounding study area. So, but yeah, the PTO letters are great. Yeah, we definitely want.
I think it's really important to get parents and the kids' feedback from you.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get it in time because they won't be thinking about school now until August 12th.
Right.
So we should try to get those out in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
And then do we have contacts, inroads to groups like Vibrant Littleton and Ruben Littleton that we can ask them to disseminate this out as well?
Yeah, Matt. So yeah, we have not asked them directly to, but we would love to get feedback on that. So, and I think typically with these sort of things, we don't coordinate directly, but we see like in the Vibrant Littleton newsletter, like when we put out an opportunity for engagement that gets pushed out, but it's probably good to reach out to them directly and just let them know this engagement opportunity.
We'd appreciate, we're trying to gather as much information we can, as much community engagement as we can, and I'd love to, if you would be willing to share this out to your mailing list, that'd be great. Remind me how much this costs?
It's the project budget is $235,000. So that includes, design, study, everything like that, project management, so.
How did you go about kind of picking the consultant that's doing this work?
Yeah, so we put out an RFP that said this is, we're doing a study. We provided some context. So, there's kind of the whole Safer Streets Littleton, everything that, all the background with that. And then said we're looking to do a total of 11 corridor studies, but we're starting this first one to kind of set the stage for it. And so release that, and then they reply. They have a formal reply. I think I could look it up. I think we had 10 teams that replied. I think we interviewed 4, and then based on the interviews, we picked the team that we thought had the best bearing. Oh no, we actually did not interview on this one because it was a smaller project budget and we were trying to get it going. But we picked the team who seemed to have the most robust understanding of the public engagement and engaging with kids and engaging with the community. There were some teams who just said, hey, we're going to have our junior planner lead public engagement. And we're like, might be really great, but the level of engagement we're expecting on this study is far higher than that. So
that consultant's just for engagement and not for design, or is that also?
Yeah, so it's one consultant team. So it's HDR is the prime, and then Y2K is the sub, but they're a safety sub. But HDR has their own public engagement wing HDR is leading the engagement as well as the overall project. Yeah.
And what is Y2K's?
Y2K, so they're a smaller engineering firm, but their focus is safety. And so that's why they brought them on to really do a good safety evaluation of everything that's going on and then make sure that anything that gets recommended is also very safe. So
Also the same consultant that removed the enforcement zones around the schools.
So they didn't remove them, they shrunk them based on federal standards, and I know there's some controversy.
Removed them. But yeah, no, they removed the enforcement zones. They stuck to only speed change zones that were 50 feet from the school.
Okay.
It used to be 1,000 feet from the school. So yeah, they completely removed the enforcement around all the schools.
Yeah, and there's some federal guidance around, if you put those things too far away, that people just start to ignore them, right? There's you get into a school zone and people just start to naturally speed up. And so, yeah, I know there's disagreement on that decision on where the appropriate placement was, so.
Placement's fine. It's the removal of the enforcement zone that was a problem.
Okay. I guess I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not getting what you're saying, the removal of the enforcement zone.
It
There's
used to be
still an
doubles.
enforcement zone.
It used to be speeds doubled at Ridge, both directions on a line. With flashers, and I totally agree with moving the flasher closer to the school. I mean, that makes perfect sense. But there's 2 levels of school zone. There's where you slow down, where you're told where you're supposed to slow down. And then there's the zone that cops can come and bust people for going over the posted speed limit. They removed that enforcement zone from the police officers. So Lottie has no double fines anywhere on it now, where there is literally no downside to having them.
You still have double fines in the school zone.
The school zone is 25 feet long. So I don't know where you
Actually, 25 feet.
25 feet from both borders.
No,
100%.
50 feet,
I will go measure it.
and not from both, but which school are you talking about?
Runyon and Euclid.
Runyon, the one on the south end, is all the way down by the Lee Gulch crossing.
The flasher.
That's way more than
Alright.
25 feet. Yes, the
To
flasher.
remove the school zone. So anyway, I don't agree with Y2K, so I'm kind of wondering how does a consultant like that get picked over somebody else? When it sounds like they just kind of adhere to old pre-West Marshall standards.
Yeah, I mean, that would not be my opinion of Y2K. And so, I mean, I think they've done a good job on kind of the safety stuff they've done. And so overall, we felt that they were the best team. And so, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, it was the public engagement that was pretty robust, and their ability to kind of deliver projects in the timeline that we had. So
They didn't do any public engagement with that school zone study though.
Right, yeah, and so that we engaged the schools, right, but that was kind of that first phase of Safer Streets Littleton, where it was kind of go put things in the ground. Yeah, so, yeah, which is also part of the reason why there's such a big emphasis on public engagement with this project, right? So
I am leery of them.
And that put things in the ground first, followed the council's priorities. It wasn't your priority, it was our priority.
There was across the board, there was a goal of getting things done quickly.
Yeah, it just wasn't you.
This is not that we don't want to get things done quickly here, but this one, there's less of a push on that and more on doing it right.
Any other questions?
Well, and I think the question I have for you guys is, you know, so we have 2 meetings slotted, right, for the consultant team to come and talk about, you know, this. We kind of have it, we're thinking that, you know, after we get through kind of the first round of public engagement, that would be a time where we'd come and touch base with you, and see what you guys think. Of course, you guys are another stakeholder, right? So we want your feedback on stuff, and you're of course welcome to go and fill out the survey. But that's a question is how do you guys want to be engaged? Understanding you're one stakeholder of many of public and council, if council decides to have us come present, so. Council's the biggest stakeholder.
So my thought is I would like to be pulled back in after public engagement and after the consultant has processed that and started to develop it. It's not, you know, done, but, you know, first draft, if you will, like here's how we're thinking about this. And I'd like us, especially if they have questions, to your point, there's always competing priorities, right? And so for them to come and put those to us, I would love to be able to weigh in on, you should go with A over B or B over A or C over all of them or whatever it is.
Are you envisioning this process being like an eye exam, A or B? Or...
A, B, A. But just, it would be good to understand, like, what is the community, you know, what is the feedback? I would like, you know, so that we can, I think it helps us understand how to pronounce the things. I would like to understand how they're thinking about it and how they're processing it, and be a voice to them. A voice, understand is one, weighing in where they're getting some questions and they're not sure which direction to go, or that's not which way to go. And then the second time, I don't know when makes sense. Second time, I mean, I would love to see it before it's officially presented, but
yeah,
I don't know what to ask for there.
Right, yeah, I mean, you're allowed to ask for anything. That was weird emphasis. You're allowed to ask for whatever. So yeah, we were thinking that the next touch point would kind of be after there's a set of alternatives developed and after there's kind of a draft framework for modal priorities. So we could come back to you guys and say, hey, here are the alternatives that we're looking at, and here's the way we're thinking about modal priorities. And when there is limited space, how do we, you know, what do we prioritize and how? So.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I have other things I'll tell you later.
All right. Any other questions or things we want to talk about on Lottie?
I don't think so. I mean, any other, you know, feedback you guys have is good, so.
I think the last thing we need to do is just pull up a few meetings and talk about what our agenda looks like for the next few months.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. See you.
Just a second, pull it up.
So as we last meeting was the first time we did this, we are trying to move forward for the board, give some visibility. We've historically just sort of surprised the board with it. And so it feels like it makes sense to talk about what's the plan going forward, and have you guys weigh in. If you like what we're doing, it's all me, and if you don't, it was Derek. So we obviously have our special sessions in June and July, and we've decided to have those to talk about the TMP update. So we're focusing our meetings still on actual other business. So for June, what we've talked about is, this goes into some of the TMP things, funding, trying to build it around the idea of funding and economic development. So do we have officially, Shane, do we have someone from the economic development team and or Chamber of Commerce?
So I believe we have economic development. I don't know if we've got a confirmation from the Chamber of Commerce, but I'll check and let you know, so.
So the idea would be have our economic development coordinator team come talk to us about, you know, what they do, because I actually met them, so I don't really know exactly how they do things. But get a little bit of that, but also talk to them just about that we are trying to figure out other ways to raise funds to
to build out the infrastructure and get their feedback and their input. And then finally, we've been talking about this doing this since January, having Brent come and talk about the 2025 capital projects. Now that we're like, we'll be halfway through the year, we can at least get a sense of where is the 3A spending going? What are we working on? Hopefully we'll have some updates on things that were done, as well as things that are going to be happening for the remainder of the year. And then July, we have Todd Lambert scheduled to join us, the LPS superintendent. Obviously, we've talked a lot about partners, and that LPS is an important partner, especially on safer streets types initiatives, but a lot of what we've been talking about. So having him come gives us the opportunity to talk to him about, you know, what can a partnership look like, what can we be doing there, and what can we ask from them. And then we've tentatively thrown in there, not sure how much time we want to dedicate to him. I sort of feel like that's probably going to be most of the meeting.
He has the gift of gab, so.
So a meeting and a half.
Yeah.
But we've also talked about, and this goes kind of into that June, but we've talked about things like talking about sidewalk fees potentially as a potential topic. We've talked about trying to reach out to Next Gen as one of our first boards that we'd connect with and try to see what overlap there is. These are, as we get further out, next month we have pretty good. Next month is a little, like, we got some ideas, but it was a little sketchy. So we're just throwing ideas out there. And then August, we need to, why do we have TMP updated in there? Are we done by August 20th?
Yeah, but that might just be over.
Okay. So we're a little light on August at this point. Some ideas we've thrown out. There's this thing floating around, the 20 is plenty. And for those of you who were, I can't remember who was on the board and who wasn't, couple years ago, we reached out, we all took on reaching out to a city that implemented Vision Zero and reviewing them, asking them kind of what worked, what didn't. And then that helped educate and inform us, city council. This plenty is sort of floating around. And Robert, I don't know if you have any input whether this thing is like still alive or dying. But the idea would be if it's still alive and there's still some questions around it, perhaps we could do that again. Reach out to cities that have tried to implement this to see what worked and what didn't, so we can.
Yeah, one of the biggest advocates for 20 is plenty is Steve Barr, and he'll still be on the council in August, but
on his way out.
Is on his way out.
So maybe that drops in priority.
Well, I don't know. I know he's a big advocate. I don't know. It's not, we haven't talked about it as a group at all since he pushed it at least a year ago.
It's happening in a lot of the surrounding cities to us too. So the fashion is coming down. So it would be good to be educated on that. See if it is something that's right for Littleton.
I agree with the education part. If it's not a hot topic, I don't know if it should be a high priority for us.
I think it's a hot topic for a lot of people that I talk to anyway.
Okay. So we can keep it on there to have that conversation next month or two. The other big topic that I want to address, and we did a little bit in March, even though I wasn't here, is transit. I want to make sure transit's an important component of the transportation system, and I don't want to lose sight of it. And so I'm not exactly sure what we should do with that in our meeting. I feel like there was probably some stuff left over from the March meeting of how do we take what we learned from Dan and Lone Tree and think about how that might translate into Littleton.
But the presentation at the Arapahoe County meeting that you and I were on,
Yeah.
I felt like that was really interesting just because it talked about they talked about both kind of what are the big this was for the county, it was still Arapahoe County, what are the big new developments that are going to impact transit, but also what are the big transit kind of priorities. And that presentation was a good learning experience for me.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was kind of a group presentation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Anyways, if we could figure out a way to get some of that information, I'm sure these guys would enjoy it.
Yeah, I know something that's like not really a tentative date, but something I think would be helpful sometime in the future is we have these kind of like partnerships with our regional communities and stuff. And it would be neat to have like maybe one or two of them come in on some of these regional projects and engage with us how Littleton works with other people, their perspective on that, and maybe how we can incorporate that into our discussions and everything.
I think the last thing we had just tentatively out in September is talking to community development and about the Littleton Boulevard plan.
Yeah, and I just actually spoke with someone over on Dev this afternoon, and they think they're gonna be done with the contract in August, so, and it's taking longer than they thought.
September might be an okay time for.
Yeah.
And then,
To kind of,
Work in the Safer Streets strategic plan, get an update on that, or
yeah, so we'll have a
that's
presentation.
close, right?
Was that
You're close to finishing that?
the strategic plan? Yeah, and that's Kenna and Emily's thing, and so we just had a meeting on it this morning to kind of flesh out some of that stuff. But we will give a Safer Streets update to council in August, tentatively scheduled. So yeah, that could be one where we encourage you guys to show up and then do a recap, or if you guys want a special presentation, we can do that too, so whatever.
Is that July?
but July is gonna be pretty tight, but given your comments about.
Todd's great. Actually, Todd would be really good input
We're gonna
on
be
the
here till
Safer
10
Street.
o'clock at night.
He's all kids all the time.
Is that something you would have ready by July?
I don't know if we'd have everything ready. I mean, we could give kind of a smaller update about stuff, but we wouldn't have like everything that we're gonna present at council ready quite yet, so.
Your dress rehearsal.
That's right, dress rehearsal.
That's a great idea.
We put that in as a possibility. Anything else?
Do we have Josh and I's updates on street types in here?
That is
Special meeting.
the July special.
Which we probably should.
Okay, so it's not on this. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Never mind.
All right, anything else? I mean, anything you see you don't want to talk about, anything that you want to talk about you don't see? You got the prioritization roughly right? Yeah. Anything that you can think of that we should be, it's a hot topic that we're not talking about?
No, I think the sub-area plan is kind of the next big thing. I mean, we had this presentation today. Some of you were at the thing for the, I heard, for the ULI stuff, and I really heard the city manager say his priority is for staff work is to do the Littleton Boulevard study before we really spend a lot of time and energy on this northern gateway. I think that will bubble along slowly, but I don't think it's going to be as hot as soon as that's what I heard today from that presentation.
So the Littleton Boulevard takes priority over.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this to you guys several times, but the big thing we're really thinking about is debt and how we want to think about debt. And we've committed, I think as a group, we feel like we do need to go into debt to cover part of mineral, part of rebuilding all of our service center, and then we would need to do debt for the Littleton downtown project. And so we're spending, and if we did anything on Ridge Road, that would probably be a debt project too. And so we're spending a lot of time just thinking about debt and the difference between, I think I've told you guys, and I apologize for repeating, but we have two options. We have certificates of participation, which are a lease. And so we just agree to pay a regular payment and get money up front for that. And the limit on that is kind of what do we think is reasonable given it would be 3A revenue. And then the other is a general obligation bond. And so we'd have to go to the voters to say, will you raise your taxes to do this? And there's a limit on that within our charter that we think is like 40 to 50 million. And so we're trying to figure out what is the right package for each of those if we have a bunch of different projects to do. And we also have a promise to do some capital improvements for the theater, the downtown.
Art Center.
Yeah, the art center. Yeah, we promised a little bit of money there. So Those are what we're thinking about. And I think any of these local roads would fit into that conversation.
What conversations are you having around additional funding? Yeah, obviously, 80% of our budget comes from sales tax. We've got Costco, which will help, right? I don't know the exact opening date, but I mean, that's why one of the reasons we need to do projects like that is that we need more funding. So I'm curious with what.
Well, so we had a budget presentation yesterday or day before yesterday. And it was the last thing we talked about, but there were a couple of big things out of it. One of the big things was, our budget grew, the revenues grew pretty quickly through the end of COVID through 2023. And then the growth is really flat. And so what that means is all of our projections that we made are kind of off. And so our hopes for future spending, everything's kind of just ratcheting down 15% chunks. And our budget is not in balance for this year, and it probably won't be in balance for next year. And the extra money that we were counting on to get from Costco is what's going to bring us into balance as opposed to creating new projects. And I am extremely, sales taxes are the most connected to what's going on in the economy. Property taxes are great, right? They are flat when things
We don't get any property.
We don't get any property taxes. And so, I'm anxious about kind of the economic uncertainty of what's going on. But we do have lots of new development that are coming online. For the Costco project, I think there's really 2 or 3 kind of confirmed tenants out of 14 or 15. And so what those tenants look like is going to drive, things too. Like the original tenant was a Lowe's, and everybody's like, oh, Lowe's they're a low revenue thing. And then some other tenant popped up and like, oh, we like that tenant. So you know what I mean? There's a lot of uncertainty around what our revenues are going to look like. We also got a presentation 2 times ago from the South Metro Fire District, and they're absolutely going for a tax increase, probably this year. And so I'm just worried there's going to be kind of this never-ending drip of local governments asking for taxes increases, and at some point, people are just going to say uncle. And so that's my anxiety. I want to do a geo bond, which will be probably a mill levy, and that. I think people are going to get tired of tax increases. I do believe that Littleton Public Schools is going to go for a bond in 2028, and that'll probably also be a tax increase.
Raising the mill.
Raising the mill. That's right. When I say that, yeah, that's right.
Is the new Costco going to be a special taxing district like it is in Sheridan?
There is a metro district. There is a metro district there. But I don't know very much about it. But yeah. And when we kind of waffle on how much to include that in our kind of revenue projections, we're kind of starting to. They're more and more kind of included in our revenue projections. But it's like first year, it's like 1.9 million, lots of money, but it really is going to bring us back to where we were hoping to be. And we did agree to add a little bit of staff internally, but I don't, in my mind, it's a tiny thing. But the bottom line is our budget is okay, but it's anxiety producing.
Yeah.
Right now. In my mind, for me, that's my bottom line. Yeah. You can have your own.
We're not flush.
We're flush. I mean, the big story is, until 3A passed, this city was running on shoestrings. And we're spending a lot of time and energy kind of catching up on maintenance on things that weren't being done. And the big capital, part of this conversation was around what do we want to do with this building? Because this building really hasn't been maintained. And they were like, knock it down and move in with Rapo. I'm like, okay, that's all right. But Bemis Library is definitely on the next 10 years of something that's going to need a lot of TLC. Everybody's storm sewer bills are going to start going up because we got to pay for all the storm sewer corrugated metal things that that were rusted out, so. We're really, in my mind, just spending a lot of time doing that.
We have, I mean, my take on it is this city spent at least 20 to 30 years putting off maintenance.
Yeah.
Trying to not raise taxes. Nobody likes taxes. Everybody wants no taxes. And the problem is that, I mean, my analogy for almost all of it is like the siding on a house, right? Like you gotta paint your siding every 5 years. And if you do that, your siding will last a long time, and you can put it off like, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. But at some point, now you gotta go spend a lot more money to go put all new siding on because you didn't spend the money to maintain it. So you're doing and we have to, and like, I mean, an example of that would be in our area, the pavement management, right? That like, everybody wants to complain about how awful our roads are. Well, I sat down with Matt and we went through the numbers, and basically if you go through kind of the maintenance schedule, trying to like what you should be doing, we should be spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million a year on pavement every single year.
We're at 5.
And we're 5, and 5, by the way, is significantly more than we've ever spent. This year is more, for many years it was $1 million we spent, $1 million a year. And then the last few years it was 3 million. And so we're at 5, but the reality is there's a big difference between 5 million and 20 million.
I would also say the other interesting thing is it's not just that you have to have the money to spend, you have to hire staff and tell staff with the capacity and tell them, plan ahead. And I don't think staff was given we want you to think about what our maintenance schedule is.
Yes.
And during my time here and kind of over the past 4 years, it's clear that we've hired staff with that as their skill set and told it, or maybe we already had staff with that skill set, but we told them to go use it. The stormwater woman, what's her name, Sarah? She's out there making plans.
Yeah.
She's doing, and that's what we want them to do.
No, there's been my sense is there's been a big culture change in staff over the last 5 to 10 years.
And I think part of it reflects the capacity of the city to actually respond to recommendations that they get ahead of things.
And just something to point out, it's like we thought about the deficiencies and like the sidewalks and stuff. The maintenance budget doesn't even touch those. That's an additional project above and beyond all that.
Yeah. You spend $100 million to build sidewalks, you actually have to put aside to take care of them too.
Correct.
So I'm sorry my comments went so long.
No, that's all right. You did a great job. All right. I think unless anyone else has anything else, we're going to adjourn.